Your home is speaking, even when you're not listening. A wall isn't just a wall. A painting isn't just art. That flower artwork hanging above your couch, it might look peaceful, elegant, familiar, but in the subtle language of Feng Shui, that image may be more than decorative. It may be sending out signals, blocking, redirecting, or quietly diluting the energy of wealth that's trying to find you. You see, energy enters a space not only through the front door, but through every item you choose to keep within sight. Your walls, your floors, your objects, they form a constellation. They tell a story. And just like a conversation can be clear or confusing, the way you arrange your space can either invite abundance or accidentally repel it. Most people don't think of art as energetic. We're taught to value aesthetics, color coordination, impersonal taste. But ancient Feng Shui teaches us that every symbol has weight. Every flower, every bird, every shade of red or gray, it all carries a vibration. When combined correctly, these vibrations support your goals. When combined carelessly, they generate noise. Let me offer you an image. Imagine walking into a room and seeing a beautiful vase of peonies, full bloom, set in the southeast corner, the wealth sector in Feng Shui. Soft morning light touches the petals. The space feels fresh, alive, filled with quiet power. Now imagine instead a wilted print of dead roses, faded by years of sunlight, hung above your headboard. The difference is subtle to the eye, but dramatic to the energy. Feng Shui isn't superstition, it's the study of alignment. And alignment, when it comes to wealth, is everything. You wouldn't wear mismatched shoes to a job interview. You wouldn't bring an umbrella into a room with no roof. So why hang artwork that conflicts with your financial direction? Why invite in energy that creates confusion where clarity is needed? In this video, we're going to decode some of the most common floral symbols used in home decor. We'll explore how flower paintings and arrangements can either harmonize with your financial flow or short-circuit it. We'll also look at some surprising examples, like why certain peony prints are powerful for attracting benefactors, and why lotus flowers, when paired with rocks, don't just look balanced, they create balance. We'll even share a true story from a figure you likely know, someone whose flower choices were anything but accidental. And by the end, you'll have a new lens to examine in your home, not through aesthetics alone, but through the lens of energy, through the lens of flow, through the lens of Feng Shui. Now, before we dive deeper into these teachings, I want to ask something simple of you. And if the idea that your space can affect your fortune resonates with you, if you've ever felt that a room has a bai you couldn't explain, or that certain areas of your home feel heavy while others feel alive, then you're already attuned to these principles, whether you know the names or not. So if this message feels familiar, if this perspective opens something in you, I invite you to support this channel. Like this video, share it with someone who's been seeking a shift, and most importantly, subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. Our goal is to reach 2,000 subscribers so we can continue creating content that doesn't just entertain, but uplifts, informs, and transforms. Every like, every comment, every share is part of a quiet ripple. And ripples build tides, because your space is not separate from your life, and your life is not separate from your energy. Every object you allow into your home becomes part of the story you're writing. Let's make sure that story is aligned with wealth, harmony, and grace. So let's begin, not just with flowers, but with the question they whisper. What are you really inviting into your life? Are you ready to find out? The meaning behind floral symbols. When petals hold power. Chrysanthemum, the flower of endurance. In Feng Shui, the chrysanthemum holds a quiet power that's often overlooked in favor of flashier symbols like the peony or lotus. But there's something remarkably enduring about the presence of this flower, especially in its golden or yellow form. Unlike blossoms that burst and fade, chrysanthemums bloom late in the season when other flowers have surrendered to cold winds and shorter days. That timing is not accidental, nor is its energetic symbolism. In traditional energy systems, endurance itself is a form of wealth. While some energy patterns seek to accelerate, bringing instant rewards and fast returns, the chrysanthemum offers something far more sustainable: the wealth that lasts through storms, cycles, and years. Golden chrysanthemums, in particular, mirror the shape and symbolism of coins. Their rounded petals radiate outward like waves of influence. This radial symmetry is deeply meaningful in classical Feng Shui, representing energy that spirals out and then returns, suggesting the natural cycle of investment, return, and renewal. In practical terms, a home that contains imagery of golden chrysanthemums, whether in the form of paintings, textiles, or even real arrangements, tends to feel rooted, not anchored in a heavy way, but in a way that allows money and opportunity to grow like slow, steady trees rather than fast-burning brush fires. For that reason, chrysanthemums are best placed in the southeast corner of a home, which governs long-term financial flow. You can also place them near the main entrance if your goal is to bring in stable benefactors or reinforce your business with consistent, reliable clients. Unlike other floral symbols that favor bursts of luck or fame, the chrysanthemum is for those who seek long-term partnerships, quiet influence, and legacy building over immediate results. There's a metaphor here that speaks louder than words. Fast flowers may turn heads, but it's the late bloomers that survive the frost. Let's bring this down to a very real-world example. Take Warren Buffett, not known for flamboyant lifestyle choices or flash-in-the-pan investments. In an interview years ago, he was asked about his favorite season. He said fall. When pressed for why, he mentioned that fall teaches you which crops are truly worth harvesting. In Feng Shui language, the chrysanthemum is the flower of fall. It signals not just abundance, but earned, tempered, enduring abundance. Its energy matches that of someone who doesn't chase the next big thing, but who knows that compound growth, whether in finance or in karma, is where the real wealth lies. So for those watching who feel tired of manifesting through intensity, or who are recovering from financial volatility, the message is this: you don't need to sprint to become wealthy. You need to align your surroundings with the kind of energy you wish to cultivate. And if what you seek is groundedness, consistency, and resilience, then the golden chrysanthemum may be more powerful than any crystal or coin. What many people miss is that visual symbols in your environment speak to your subconscious constantly. A flower placed above your desk or by your doorway doesn't just brighten the room. It shapes the mental narrative you carry each time you pass by. It subtly reinforces what you believe about growth, timing, and value. A golden chrysanthemum tells your space: we honor what lasts. We are open to patient prosperity. We respect the kind of wealth that isn't loud, but never leaves. That's a far cry from the messages our environments often whisper: rush, compete, spend. The chrysanthemum whispers something calmer: trust the cycle. From a Feng Shui perspective, balance is often more powerful than intensity. And balance is what the chrysanthemum delivers. Its bloom doesn't scream for attention. It simply appears, quietly perfect, in the later chapters of the year, reminding us that wealth too may arrive later than we expect, but with more staying power than we ever imagined. 2. Orchid, precision and quiet magnetism. In the layered world of Feng Shui, where every corner holds a message and every object casts a frequency, the orchid rises quietly as one of the most elegant symbols of cultivated abundance. Unlike the riotous energy of red flowers or the opulence of peonies, the orchid never shouts. It doesn't chase attention with sneeze or color. Instead, it offers something more rare: precision. In Feng Shui, this precision carries significant meaning. It reflects intentionality, discernment, and quiet magnetism. It's no surprise then that orchids are best suited for places where clarity and elevated choices matter, such as your workspace, home office, or areas associated with personal influence. In traditional energy mapping, these flowers are aligned with the metal element, crisp, refined, and intellectually sharp. Their symmetrical petals and clean lines visually represent balance and mental order. They are neither too yang nor overly yin, making them one of the few flowers that function as a neutral enhancer, supportive, stabilizing, but never overwhelming. Their presence suggests clarity of purpose. When you walk into a room and see a single orchid, carefully placed, not crowded or diminished by clutter, it speaks to the energy of someone who knows their worth without needing to advertise it. That is the energetic frequency of real wealth, not showy accumulation, but steady magnetism. The kind of success that grows not in chaos, but in cultivated stillness. Place a white or pale-colored orchid near your work desk, and you may notice something interesting. Not a sudden lottery win or a viral post, but a quiet sharpening of your focus. Fewer distractions, more alignment between your goals and your actions. A sense that your decisions are not rushed, but chosen. This is the wealth path of the orchid. It doesn't favor excess, it favors excellence. And in a culture that too often mistakes speed for success, the orchid returns us to the truth that what is elegant often outlasts what is loud. Consider the story of Michelle Obama. Known not just for her grace under pressure, but for her clarity of presence, she once shared in an interview that she's drawn to quiet spaces with intentional design. Her home office, as shown in several lifestyle features, includes minimalist decor and singular living plants, often an orchid. She said, "When my space is clear, I am clear." This is the orchid in practice. Minimalism that magnetizes. Precision that leads. Wealth, not in noise, but in knowing. The orchid also teaches something subtle but vital about boundaries. While many flowers sprawl or droop as they age, the orchid remains upright, firm, elegantly contained. That form mirrors emotional structure. It reinforces the belief that we can be soft without collapsing, generous without overextending. Energetically, that signals confidence. And confidence, in Feng Shui and in life, is a wealth frequency. When we carry ourselves with clarity, when our homes reflect that clarity back to us, we stop chasing and start attracting. So if your financial life feels scattered, not because you lack effort, but because there's too much noise, consider what you place in your field of vision each day. What does your home office say about the kind of opportunities you're prepared to welcome? Is it chaotic or composed? Is it filled with the past or calling in the future? The orchid doesn't need a crowd. One stem, placed with care, can recalibrate a room. And that's the essence of Feng Shui. It's not about how much, but about how well. An orchid tells the energy in your home. I choose to rise, but with calm. I choose success, but not stress. I grow, but I do not rush. In this way, the orchid becomes a daily reminder of refined abundance, of elevated discernment, of wealth that builds in silence, like roots preparing for bloom. And when it finally arrives, like the orchid's delicate flower, it is unmistakable. And like the orchid's poem. 3. Narcissus, seasonal timing and talent activation. Among the many floral symbols honored in classical Feng Shui, the narcissus occupies a distinct role, not because of its flamboyance or beauty, but because of its timing. Often blooming at the cusp of the Lunar New Year, this flower is less about immediate fortune and more about potential, specifically the kind of potential that has been dormant, waiting, and finally begins to awaken when the external environment aligns. In this way, the narcissus becomes an emblem not just of beauty or fragrance, but of readiness. It speaks to the idea that some forms of abundance are not about effort or force, but about timing. Just as seeds beneath frozen ground wait patiently until warmth returns, talents within us wait until conditions are right. The narcissus blooms not because it tries harder, but because the season calls it forth. This principle sits at the heart of Feng Shui philosophy. Energy, or Qi, is never static. It moves in cycles. It arrives not just when you want it, but when you've prepared your environment to receive it. The narcissus, in this sense, is a floral reminder that timing isn't passive. It's a practice. When placed in a home during periods of change, be it the start of a new year, a career shift, a move to a new city, it acts as a quiet activator. Not to rush change, but to mark that the window has opened. This is why many Chinese households display narcissus during the Lunar New Year. It's not merely for tradition. It's to send a signal to the space and to the self. We are ready to grow in a new way. We are no longer carrying the same energy of the past. We are resetting our field. In Feng Shui, that act of symbolic placement matters. When you bring a narcissus bulb into your home, you are introducing a frequency of awakening, of inner gifts being stirred, of long-held intentions rising to the surface. This flower does not shout. It does not command. It simply appears on time, and that in itself is power. Think of someone like Oprah Winfrey. For much of her early life, she had talent but lacked timing. But when the environment matched her readiness, when her inner preparation met an outer platform, her gifts bloomed publicly, almost effortlessly. She has often spoken about the importance of listening to life, of understanding the right moment. That's narcissus energy. It doesn't perform on cue. It waits for alignment. And when it arrives, its message is simple. You were ready all along. From a practical Feng Shui standpoint, placing narcissus in the north sector of your home can energize career potential, while positioning it near your workspace can ignite creativity or the emergence of hidden talents. It's especially effective when paired with transition rituals, lighting a new candle, moving into a new room, or setting fresh intentions at the start of a lunar cycle. It says to your space, into your psyche, the new path is now viable. The moment to activate what's dormant has arrived. For those feeling stuck or unsure, not because of lack of skill, but because of unclear timing, the narcissus becomes a mirror. It doesn't tell you to rush. It simply asks, have you cleared space for what wants to grow? And that's the central wisdom. Some forms of success are not summoned, they are invited. You make room, you create openness, you allow light. In that light, what is dormant can recognize itself and rise. The narcissus teaches that readiness is a frequency. It's the quiet confidence of someone who has done the inner work and is no longer asking when, but listening for now. That is where timing and talent meet. That is where seasonal abundance blooms. Or firm. Lotus and rock imagery. Grace meets grounding in the visual language of Feng Shui, where symbolism carries more than aesthetic meaning. The imagery of the lotus flower rising from rocks or murky water conveys a profound energetic signature. One that speaks not only of beauty, but of resilience, elevation, and deeply anchored strength. This is not just decoration. It is a coded message to your space. A reminder that grace does not grow in perfect conditions, but often in the midst of resistance. The lotus, admired across countless cultures, is a classic symbol of spiritual emergence. But in the context of Feng Shui, especially when paired with stone or rock elements, it embodies a dual virtue: the capacity to rise elegantly while remaining rooted. In the energetic architecture of a home, this pairing supports the marriage of yin and yang, softness with stability, refinement with structure. Idealism with grounded execution. Imagine hanging a painting of a white or pink lotus blossoming above black stones or granite near your living room or the southeast sector of your home, the area traditionally associated with wealth. You are not just enhancing visual balance. You are placing a spiritual totem of progress in the heart of your domestic life. The rocks in the imagery aren't cold or obstructive. They are the very foundation that allows the lotus to rise. Energetically, they send the message, this beauty is not accidental. It is supported, held, and earned. The lotus alone might signal aspiration. The rocks alone might suggest endurance. But together they become a blueprint for sustainable wealth and generational integrity. They whisper to the environment, let what is noble emerge from what is real. Historically, this combination of motifs was not just admired artistically, it was curated intentionally by emperors and dynasties seeking to embody longevity. In the palaces of the Qing dynasty, lotus and rock motifs adorned not just gardens but private chambers and scrolls, or a commission for ceremonial gifting. They symbolize more than aesthetics. They captured the dynasty's intention to rule with virtue and to rise above court politics without forgetting the power of rooted values. This was wealth with principle, growth without compromise. One modern parallel might be seen in the way someone like Angela Merkel, the former Chancellor of Germany, is known for her unassuming strength and deeply principled leadership. While not flashy, her presence communicated stability. Her choices were rooted in clarity and process, not impulse. In a world enamored with charisma, she embodied grace built on substance. That's lotus and rock energy in human form. From a placement perspective, if you're seeking more than fleeting luck, if your goal is long-term financial health, emotional steadiness, or family unity, then hanging or displaying lotus and rock imagery in communal zones is particularly potent. This includes dining areas, family rooms, or even home offices where strategic planning happens. The image serves as a visual mantra. Beauty can rise where the foundation is honored. There is also a psychological impact. Every time you pass that image, a quiet imprint registers that challenges are not barriers, but backdrops for elegance. That what appears heavy may in fact be the soil for something soft to bloom. Over time, this shapes not only how you design your space, but how you narrate your life. You stop asking for ease and start cultivating strength. That shift is vibrational, and vibration is what draws or repels prosperity. In the Feng Shui system, art is not passive. It is an energy projector. And when you choose art that reflects both aspiration and grounding, you align your surroundings with a path that supports sustainable success. That is the lesson of the lotus and the stone, not to avoid difficulty, but to use it as texture. Not to hide your roots, but to rise from them. Because when beauty meets grounding, the result isn't just art. It's power in stillness, fortune with integrity, and the quiet magnetism of a home that knows exactly what it's made of. How art conveys intention. Your paintings as mantras. In Feng Shui, art is not merely a passive visual indulgence. It is an energetic blueprint, a living dialogue between space and intention. A painting is not just color and brushstroke, it is coded language, a symbolic mantra that speaks continuously to your subconscious and to the energetic ecosystem of your home. When you walk past a flower painting day after day, you may not consciously register its message, but your body, your mood, your choices, they do. Whether the image whispers harmony or hints at struggle, whether it invites flow or freezes it, depends entirely on the symbols you allow to hang in your line of sight. For instance, take a painting of roses with exaggerated thorns. At first glance, it might feel dramatic, maybe even artistically bold. But energetically, it tells the story of beauty paired with resistance, love laced with caution. In a relationship corner or bedroom, This type of imagery can translate subtly into tension, unspoken expectations, or emotional defensiveness. Now contrast that with a painting of a blooming peony, lush, full, expansive petals opening unapologetically. This signals generosity, abundance, and confidence. The flower doesn't whisper, it proclaims, "I'm ready to receive." Likewise, wilted blooms or faded, dull florals, no matter how vintage or nostalgic, may transmit decay or stasis, particularly in areas meant to represent wealth or growth. If your money sector features an artwork where petals fall or colors blur into a muddy blend, it may not just be bad taste, it could be silently echoing financial fatigue. In Feng Shui, color matters. Red energizes, gold attracts, green nourishes. When these tones appear in art, they do more than please the eye. They recalibrate the room. The presence of soft pinks or purples can stimulate loving energy, while watery blues may soothe, but if placed inappropriately, might even extinguish needed fire in a sector that demands vitality. Motion within art also counts. A flower painted rising towards sunlight supports upward chi. One drooping or overshadowed by its background can dampen it. Even the orientation of stems, the spread of petals, or the balance of space in the composition all play roles in shaping the room's ki. Imagine the image as a mantra, but visual. Just as you wouldn't chant a phrase of despair or defeat daily, you shouldn't hang imagery that murmurs lack or tension. Because just like spoken mantras rewire your neural pathways, visual mantras rewire your spatial vibration. Each image is a suggestion whispered to your environment over and over. A sunflower reaching upward against a clear sky says, "I rise with purpose." A cluttered floral still life with no focal point says, "I'm undecided and overwhelmed." You may not hear the message, but your nervous system does. This is why intentionality matters. Just as you wouldn't let anyone speak over you mindlessly, you shouldn't let just any image speak over your walls. For practical placement, consider choosing artwork that embodies not just beauty, but aspiration. Ask yourself, does this image feel like it's moving forward? Is it radiant? Is it spatially balanced? Could it support the mood I want this room to hold? In a workspace, opt for flowers in bloom, symbolizing unfolding ideas and productivity. In a family space, choose clusters or bouquets, signifying unity, abundance, and shared strength. And in areas tied to personal growth or finances, prioritize upward lines, vibrant hues, and ample light within the composition. Avoid florals that are overly abstract, dark, or visually heavy, unless balanced with elements of brightness or motion. There's also a cultural and personal layer. A lotus in Chinese symbology suggests spiritual refinement. In your home, it can anchor peaceful ambition. A daisy may recall childhood joy, while a lily could evoke solemnity or transition. It's not about the rule, it's about the resonance. What story does the flower tell? What seed does it plant in your atmosphere? Think of your paintings not as statements of taste, but as investments in energy. They are visual affirmations that echo endlessly. Choose them like you choose your thoughts, with clarity, with intention, and with respect for what they're about to attract. Because in Feng Shui, your home is not just a shelter, it is a field of frequency. And every image, every flower, every stroke is shaping the song it sings. Birds and florals, symbolic flight toward fortune. 1. Peacocks, radiance, reputation, and benefactors. In classical Feng Shui, few symbols convey as rich and powerful a combination of beauty and auspicious meaning as the peacock. More than just a decorative bird with extravagant feathers, the peacock embodies a potent, energetic message rooted in clarity, prestige, and elevated connection. When understood properly, its presence in your space becomes not just ornamental, but transformational. Each feather of the peacock is said to contain an eye, which, in energetic terms, symbolizes heightened perception, intuitive intelligence, and spiritual awareness. These eyes, scattered across the fan of its tail, create a multi-dimensional field of vigilance and an insight. It's not about watching the world with suspicion. It's about cultivating discernment, anticipating new opportunities, and aligning with invisible benefactors. Those who, often unseen, can guide, support, or elevate you at key junctures in life. This is why in many classical traditions, the peacock has been associated with divine favor and grace. In Hinduism, it is linked with Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom, music, and learning. In Chinese symbolism, it represents the presence of noble helpers and the enhancement of one's social and professional reputation. Placing peacock imagery in the right location is essential. One of the most potent spots is directly behind your desk in a home office or workspace. This positioning does more than decorate the wall. It places you symbolically and energetically in front of a field of benevolent vision. You become the focal point of an invisible network of eyes that guard your ambitions and draw in recognition. When seated with a peacock behind you, your back is metaphorically supported by reputation, elegance, and intelligence. It becomes easier to speak with conviction, to attract clients or collaborators who align with your values, and to feel protected from hidden opposition. Alternatively, placing peacock imagery facing your front door, especially in entryways or opposite the threshold, creates a guardian feel. This arrangement not only welcomes refined energy into the space, but filters it. The symbolic gaze of the peacock's feathers inspects what enters. You're not just inviting guests or experiences, you're inviting quality. The frequency of the peacock doesn't resonate with chaos or confusion. It invites order, admiration, and sophisticated abundance. Energetically, the peacock is also aligned with the fire element, radiant, charismatic, and transformative. This makes it especially powerful for individuals in fields where personal image, performance, or brand visibility matter. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a performer, a public speaker, or someone seeking to rise in a competitive environment, the presence of the peacock can amplify your aura and sharpen how others perceive you. It's the energetic equivalent of dressing impeccably without having to wear anything. But this radiance must be balanced. A room overpowered by peacock imagery can tilt toward vanity or overexposure. In Feng Shui, too much fire without grounding can lead to burnout or unwanted attention. That's why placement and scale are crucial. A single, well-framed artwork or textile, ideally with soft golden, teal, or indigo tones, is sufficient to activate the peacock's qualities. Avoid overly aggressive reds or exaggerated postures that feel theatrical rather than dignified. You want presence, not performance. There's also a layer of personal alignment to consider. The peacock doesn't chase, it displays. Its wealth is not in what it seeks, but in what it reveals naturally. This invites a powerful Feng Shui meditation. Are you attracting attention that reflects your essence, or are you projecting to impress? Peacock imagery works best when you are already cultivating inner clarity and intention. Then its outward radiance becomes a mirror of your internal refinement. It subtly reminds you that real wealth isn't always transactional. It often arrives through visibility, elegance, and grace. The people who support your path, mentors, sponsors, clients, often find you not because you pushed, but because you aligned. In practical terms, enhance this symbolism by pairing your peacock artwork with a few complementary elements. A crystal geode beneath the painting adds grounding. A small jade or coin bowl placed below the frame can represent accumulation of honor and earnings. And if positioned in a hallway or entrance, ensure there is natural or well-designed light nearby so that the peacock doesn't sit in darkness. Its brilliance must be seen to activate. In conclusion, when you invite a peacock into your space, you're not just adding beauty, you're anchoring a declaration. You're saying to the space and to yourself, I'm ready to be seen clearly. I'm ready to attract support that reflects my truth. I'm willing to embody radiance not as a mask, but as a frequency. The peacock's feathers don't whisper, they command attention without noise. And in the subtle language of space, that's a form of power that needs no words. 2. Cranes with blossoms, longevity and harmony. In the symbolic universe of Feng Shui, few images offer as much quiet wisdom and graceful power as the pairing of cranes with blossoming flowers. This isn't just a decorative motif, it's a visual mantra that speaks of long life, inner balance, and an enduring relationship between movement and stillness. Cranes have long stood as the nobility of birds in Eastern iconography. With their elegant posture and fluid stride, they represent not only physical longevity, but also a refined energy field, one that is cultivated through discipline, harmony with nature, and deep presence. When a crane appears in art, it is not a casual visitor. It brings with it the energy of protection over time, an assurance that the space it inhabits is one aligned with graceful aging, spiritual lift, and steady well-being. When cranes are paired with blossoms, peach, plum, lotus, or cherry, the image becomes even more layered. Blossoms in Feng Shui represent renewal, beauty, and the bloom of ideas, love, and seasonal opportunity. When seen beside a crane, these flowers soften and complement the crane's vertical, long-lived trajectory. The crane holds the energy of upward movement over decades. The blossoms bring joy to the moment. Together, they depict an energy that is both grounded and radiant, yin and yang, timeless and transient. This duality is essential in a home that seeks balance, not just prosperity or protection, but peace across seasons of life. That's why this image isn't meant for high-traffic, transactional spaces like offices or entryways. Its energy is most beneficial where stillness is cultivated. Elder bedrooms, rest corners, or meditation areas. These are places where one doesn't just recover, but remembers, where reflection isn't distraction, but nourishment. Placing an artwork of cranes with blossoms in such a zone is like hanging a visual prayer for sustained vitality. For elders, it carries the message that aging can be beautiful when surrounded by life, light, and softness. For those in a reflective phase, grieving, healing, or contemplating, it offers an unspoken reminder. You are held in the arms of nature's longer rhythm. Nothing urgent, nothing forced, just continuity. But the meaning deepens when we examine the movement within the image. Are the cranes flying or resting? Are the blossoms blooming or falling? A resting crane with open blossoms speaks to serenity at its peak, an ideal Feng Shui symbol for those recovering from illness or stress. A flying crane with petals drifting implies forward movement after a pause, suitable for someone entering a new phase of life, retirement, reinvention, or even a late-life marriage. In both cases, the image doesn't just adorn, it guides. It aligns your personal story with an archetype that transcends culture. That of a life well lived, not rushed, and always surrounded by beauty. In terms of color and placement, subtlety is your ally. Avoid loud or saturated depictions. Opt instead for hand-drawn ink scrolls, muted tones, or watercolor prints. These create a soft field of energy that invites rest and introspection. Hang the image at eye level when seated, never too high, never above beds, and certainly not in kitchens or workspaces. This is not a doing symbol. It is a being one. Consider placing a soft cushion, a wooden bench, or a simple altar near it. Perhaps even a fresh flower in season, changed weekly to keep the energy alive. A silk cloth beneath the artwork, especially in colors like ivory, sage, or rose, can enhance its vibration without overpowering the scene. Add a piece of jade or a smooth stone nearby to represent grounded clarity. The image of cranes with blossoms also offers a lesson on relationships, how we can age with others, not in competition, but in mutual support. The crane doesn't overshadow the blossom. The flower doesn't cling to the bird. They exist beside each other, lightly, respectfully, and beautifully. That's a subtle but powerful Feng Shui teaching. Healthy relationships do not drain, they amplify. Healthy homes do not dominate the spirit, they hold it gently so it can rise. And for those who like to anchor such energies with real-life stories, we can look to Tadao Ando, the Japanese architect revered for his deeply spiritual spaces. Though not a Feng Shui master, Ando often uses natural light, reflection, and organic materials in ways that mimic the essence of crane and blossom symbolism. His Church of the Light, for instance, pairs stillness with illumination, much like a crane resting near blooming petals. Those who enter these spaces often report feeling not overwhelmed, but calmed, aligned, reawakened. That's the power of quiet symbolism made tangible. That's what a well-placed image of cranes with blossoms can echo in your own space, if not through architecture, then through careful curation of art. In a world obsessed with urgency, loud colors, and performative design, to choose something as humble and harmonious as cranes with blossoms is to declare that your wealth is rooted not in speed, but in steadiness. That you value time not just as a calendar metric, but as a sacred container for grace to grow. And when your walls whisper such values daily, the energy in your life begins to listen. 3. Butterflies among blooms, romantic and emotional luck. In the poetic grammar of Feng Shui, few images convey emotional lightness and romantic synchrony more subtly than butterflies among flowers. To the untrained eye, it may appear ornamental, perhaps a charming spring motif or a nostalgic nod to garden life. But within the energetic architecture of your home, this pairing speaks in a quiet, transformative language. A language of attraction not rooted in seduction, but in harmony. A visual vibration that doesn't chase romance, but aligns the heart with its natural rhythm. In classical Feng Shui, butterflies are symbols of joy, not merely in the pursuit of partnership, but in the cultivation of emotional balance. They don't force entry into the bloom, they arrive when the bloom is ready. They don't land with urgency, but with invitation. This is the essence of how butterflies teach us to live, not with grasping, but with gravitation. When you incorporate imagery of butterflies dancing among flowers into your space, you're not simply decorating. You're making a choice about how energy moves within your relationships, whether it's with a partner, a child, or even your own inner self. This symbol gently coaxes tension to melt and receptivity to rise. That's why the placement matters. This image doesn't belong in offices or stairwells. It thrives where hearts intersect. Shared bedrooms, family lounges, places where moods gather like morning light through a curtain. In these zones, a butterfly and bloom motif serves as a kind of emotional tuning fork. If tension has hardened the air, it softens it. If energy feels too sharp, it rounds the edge. It doesn't remove the challenge, but it eases the arrival of understanding. Color also plays a critical role. While bright, saturated tones may seem cheerful, they can overwhelm the frequency this image is trying to emit. Opt instead for pastels, rose, lavender, sky blue, pale gold. These aren't just easier on the eye, they allow the image to act as a quiet mood adjuster, not a visual command. Think of the energy as a gentle breeze, not a gust. In this softness, energy finds room to exhale. One subtle Feng Shui insight is that butterflies symbolize transformation through delight. not struggle. That's key. Many people try to fix relationships through talk, therapy, confrontation. While those tools have value, the energy field of a home often responds more quickly to harmony than to analysis. When a butterfly floats over a flower, no one explains it. It just works. So too does the silent geometry of this motif. Let's ground this with a modern example. Beyoncé, arguably one of the most powerful creative forces of our time, has spoken in interviews about how the emotional tone of her home shapes her creativity and family life. While not citing Feng Shui by name, she references the importance of softness, flow, and balance in her interior spaces. A gentle palette, natural light, and symbolic elements like floral art and winged forms help her reset after intense periods of touring or creation. In one Vogue spread, a butterfly motif appeared near her daughter's reading area, almost imperceptible, but undeniably intentional. The message, emotional harmony isn't a luxury, it's architecture, and the way we use images within our walls helps shape how we connect beyond them. In terms of specific application, place this artwork at eye level near a bedside or on the wall between two chairs in a family space. Don't place it above headboards or behind televisions. It's not meant to command, but to accompany. Add a small diffuser with essential oils like rose or ylang-ylang nearby, or a simple silk throw in pastel hues. These subtle additions help reinforce the image's vibration, like adding violin strings beneath a melody. If your home has experienced recent conflict or emotional stagnation, cleanse the wall before placing this image. Use a soft cloth with water infused with flower petals. Rose or jasmine work well. This helps invite new energy rather than layering old emotion beneath new symbols. Butterflies among blooms don't promise love. They prepare space for it. They don't guarantee peace. They extend the invitation. And in a world that often teaches us to hustle even for harmony, this image reminds us that the most meaningful connections emerge not from control, but from resonance. When your space begins to reflect that belief, your relationships, romantic or otherwise, begin to breathe a little easier too. Story: the orchid that anchored Michelle Obama. During her years in the White House, Michelle Obama stood as a symbol of grace under pressure. Whether she was championing health initiatives, representing American families on global stages, or simply greeting guests with her disarming warmth, she carried an unmistakable energy, elegant, composed, quietly powerful. While much of that presence was shaped by experience and character, Feng Shui experts and energy observers often noticed a subtle, visual anchor that seemed to accompany her through interviews, photo ops, and formal events: the white orchid. You might think it was purely aesthetic. After all, the White House is no stranger to carefully curated floral arrangements. But those who understand the language of space and energy see something deeper. In classical Feng Shui, white orchids represent a refined yin quality, the kind of energy that draws others not through force, but through serenity. Orchids are precision made visible. Their form is balanced. Their colors are rarely loud, and yet they captivate. They command attention not by shouting, but by standing still. There were moments during high-stakes speeches, international appearances, even casual sit-downs with journalists, when that white orchid would sit quietly in the frame. And whether intentionally placed or not, its energetic message remained: calm over chaos, grace over noise, presence over performance. It didn't demand attention, but it shaped the atmosphere nonetheless. This is the quiet power of environment. The orchid became less a decoration and more a companion to Michelle's natural frequency, a silent reminder that energy can be both contained and expansive at the same time. But here's the deeper takeaway. You don't need to be First Lady or to sit beneath crystal chandeliers to access this kind of energetic support. Even a single orchid placed with awareness can shift how you show up in your own space, in your study, at your work desk, by the window where you journal. When chosen with care, it becomes more than a flower. It becomes a tuning fork for your own stillness. Sometimes composure begins not with a deep breath, but with a simple bloom. Practical reset. How to choose and place floral energy. Energy doesn't wait for grand gestures. It gathers in the small, intentional choices we make every day. And one of the most overlooked places it gathers is in our walls. Step into any room and ask yourself quietly, what does the art here say to my energy field? Are the flowers in your home vibrant and purposeful? Or are they faded, forgotten, half tucked behind furniture, or lost in cluttered corners? The first step in resetting your floral energy begins with an audit, not of money or space, but of attention. What floral imagery already exists in your home? Are there petals curling inward, dark tones that feel heavy, or thorny arrangements that no longer reflect who you are becoming? This is not about aesthetics, it's about alignment. Once you've observed what is, the second step is to choose what will be. Each flower and color carries its own frequency, and when selected with care, these visuals become tools of alignment. Golden yellow blooms, such as chrysanthemums or sunflowers, can activate prosperity and joy, especially when placed near your main entrance or the southeast corner of your living room. White florals like orchids or plum blossoms bring clarity and composure. They are perfect for workspaces, reading nooks, or anywhere you wish to foster calm focus. Red flowers pulse with the energy of passion and vitality. Use them to activate romance or to wake up a stagnant corner of your space. And green, especially leafy florals, restore emotional balance, grounding you when life feels scattered or overwhelming. The third and most vital step is placement. In Feng Shui, energy follows attention. What you see regularly, your energy learns to imitate. So place your chosen floral art or arrangement somewhere you'll truly notice it. Opposite your desk, near your bedroom door, beside the mirror you use each morning. Let it catch your eye in a moment of hurry and remind you to pause. Let it be the still presence that rewires your day without needing to speak. And remember, the flower doesn't change your life, but your attention to it does. What you honor in your space, whether through bloom or brushstroke, becomes the quiet invitation for all else to follow. Final. A flower does not shout, it does not knock or demand. It simply blooms, quietly shaping the space it inhabits with presence, clarity, and a rhythm that never rushes. In Feng Shui, this is not decorative. It is directional. A flower is a compass, and the ones we place in our homes, whether living, printed, or painted, speak on our behalf long after we've left the room. They speak to wealth, to peace, to growth, or they echo confusion, stagnation, and longing we haven't yet named. The difference lies not in color or species, but in intention. A golden chrysanthemum in the southeast corner doesn't just brighten a room, it signals readiness to sustain. A white orchid near your work desk doesn't just look elegant, it whispers stillness into ambition. And a painting of a lotus rising from rock is not just symbolic, it's a vow you hang on your wall, reminding you that grace can be born from hardship, that prosperity can be rooted in calm. When chosen with awareness, these are not decorations, they are decisions. Energetic declarations that shape how chi flows, how emotion settles, and how fortune finds its way in. So take a moment, not just to decorate, but to align. Walk through your home as if reading a map drawn by your past intentions. What does this flower say? What does this image invite? What energy have I let speak for me, silently, daily, without my conscious permission? Because in the end, one single petal, placed with care, is louder than 1,000 words left in clutter. And when your space begins to whisper in harmony with your spirit, you will not need to search for luck. It will already be arriving. If this video gave you a new way to see your home and its hidden messages, I warmly invite you to take one small action today. Leave a comment below. What flower calls to you now? What image feels like it's missing from your walls? I would love to hear. And if this content brought you clarity, peace, or inspiration, please help us grow this mindful community by liking, sharing, and subscribing to New Day Mindfulness. With your support, we are on our way to reaching 2,000 subscribers. One flower, one gesture, one intention at a time.